Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker, and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this is to help you if you're scared of Trump starting a world war, which is not possible at all, by attacking Iran. And I was missing some of the trees for the wood in my last video, because I didn't realise some of the things that people believed, which is the reason why you were so scared. So I hope that by going through and fact checking these things that so many people believe that are false, that this will help you. So first of all, I found that many people falsely believe, completely false belief, but understandable, is that Trump wants to join in with bombing Iranian civilians, just like Israel has done in Gaza Strip. No, he doesn't want to attack any civilians. There won't be any civilians involved if he approves this strike. Many assume that, and this is by analogy I think with Assad, they assume that Russia supports the Ayatollah like he supported Assad in Syria. No, he doesn't. Russia has never supported Ayatollah with military soldiers. And there are no military soldiers, there are no Russian soldiers in Iran. Only some Russian civilians to help with their nuclear program, their civilian nuclear program. And then many people assume that Russia has a defense pact with Iran. And of course that'd be scary if you thought that. No, all it has is a mutual non-aggression pact. I've read some of the mainstream media and they're very confusing about this. They don't explain this to you properly. All that Putin has promised to Iran is that if the United States attacks Iran, then Putin will not supply the United States with bombs to attack Iran. Since there's no way it would do that anyway, it's a pretty useless promise. That's all that Putin has promised. And then many people assume that Iran is Russia's nuclear umbrella. That'd be very scary if you believe that. Again, that's completely false. Nor was Syria, and nor is Crimea. And Russia's nuclear umbrella doesn't even apply to Ukraine attacking Russia with its defensive attacks, destroying Russia's own strategic bombers. And it's very clear that is not covered by Russia's nuclear umbrella. Because the reason that Ukraine had destroyed Russia's strategic bombers is because those bombers were dropping conventional bombs on Ukraine. So they were a valid thing for them to attack. So Russia does have a deterrent, but it's a deterrent to prevent an overwhelming attack that would take over the Russian Federation. And the whole point of nuclear deterrent is it only works if you never use it. And you never need to use it. Then you're deterring properly. So this has nothing to do with Russia's nukes, nothing whatsoever to do with it. So now let's look at why you're safe if Trump approves this strike on Iran. I think it's quite unlikely that he will, and probably not. He's got this 2 weeks delay, and during that delay he clearly wants Iran to negotiate with him. He wants a peace treaty. He doesn't agree with Israel at all on their approach. He wants peace with Iran. So now let's look at what Israel is requesting of the United States. And once you realize what they're requesting, I think you will realize it's a very simple mission. So you look down there, these are the B-2 bombers. And it's a stealth bomber that flies an extraordinary height in the sky. Very few things can hit it at that height. At 15 kilometers. That's several kilometers above the height that an intercontinental jet travels. And it's a stealth bomber, hard to see in radar, and it carries the bomb buster bombs that you've heard about. Now these bombs have to be dropped from its very highest altitude, because the higher they fall from, the faster they're traveling when they hit the ground. So the mission that Israel is requesting from the United States is to fly some of its stealth bombers at its highest possible altitude and to drop a bomb directly into this facility here. And you can see that white thing is just support the structures on the surface. The actual facility is secret, it's underground, and it's 80 to 100 meters below the ground. And I've got a better picture of it down here. Let's have a look. So that's from the BBC. This is a sport building, and those are the I haven't labelled them on that. So those green things, they are the 6 entrances to the underground bunker, which is where the Iran does its nuclear enrichment. So that's what Iran wants to, what Israel wants the United States to bomb. And the United States would choose somewhere like, oh dear, I didn't mean to do that. We would choose somewhere like that, say. And we choose one of these. Let's go down and look at it, because that's the whole point. So I can show you these entrances. The 6 entrances. So it might hit the entrances, but it might just hit in the center of it. And it would just keep dropping the same V2 carried bunker buster bomb in exactly the same spot over and over and over again. And that's its mission. And suppose they had say 6 B2 bombers fly over, each carrying 2 of those bunker buster bombs. They could drop 12 bombs one after the other in just a single mission on that one point. So that's the aim. And the US military are confident that they can get through if they take on this task. It's, given the equipment they have, it's a simple and straightforward task for them. It's buried 80 to 100 meters. One of those bombs will get through 60 meters. You might think, oh, drop a second one, you're through. But no, because it backfills. You have to keep on dropping bombs in the same spot. But by the time you've done half a dozen, or maybe a dozen or something, eventually you'll get through. And then it's not a radiation hazard. So many people have this bizarre idea. Well, not bizarre if you don't know what it's all about, what it's about. But yeah, where we've got. So this is actually plutonium. And it's in the form of a ring. And enriched uranium is almost the same level of radioactivity as plutonium, which is very little indeed. And so Queen Elizabeth in 1955, and that's she was, a photograph of her aged in 1955. And at that age, the United Kingdom and nuclear scientists, they handed her a big lump of uranium in a plastic bag, or plutonium in a plastic bag. And the thin plastic bag was enough to block out the alpha particles, which is the only form of radiation that plutonium and uranium produce of any significance. It has some other particles, but they're not important. And so you can handle this material in your own hands with just a piece of plastic shielding or paper or something to shield it, because alpha particles are very feeble and they just stop by paper or plastic. And it only becomes highly radioactive after a chain reaction. So you've got to get a huge chunk of plutonium or a huge chunk of uranium, clump them together very, very fast if you want to make a bomb. Or you do it rather slowly if you want to have a nuclear reactor. And then once they come together and there's enough of them in one spot, then the chain reaction starts up of neutrons splitting other atoms, which produce more neutrons which split other atoms. And that process goes on and on and on, and it quickly becomes very radioactive. But this hasn't happened yet. This is just nuclear fuel. So that's why what they have under there, it's not a radiation acid. The bombs will keep hitting over and over and over in the same spot. They'd eventually get through. When they get through, they destroy all the centrifuges down there. The uranium, enriched uranium, 60% uranium, will be mixed up with the dirt and be utterly useless. And that'd be the end of the mission. And it wouldn't even get to the surface, it would be down below, because it's in the centrifuge. The centrifuge gets smashed. The uranium, which is in the form of a gas, when it's in the centrifuge, uranium hexafluoride, if it's hot enough. And that's how they separate it. And if they've got any stashes, the stash would presumably get broken up, and all the shards and bits of material get broken up and mixed up with the dirt. And that's the end of it. So this is that's why I say there, it's actually less hazardous for local people than bombing a chemical weapons factory. And it's far less risk for the United States too, because when they flew over Syria, there were Russian air defences in Syria, and Russia and the United States had deconfliction hotlines at that time during the Civil War, because they were both attacking ISIS, and they wanted to make sure they didn't attack each other by mistake. And so the United States in 2018, they rang up the Russians and said, we need a corridor from here to there. They didn't tell them what it was for. The Russians could easily have guessed it was hitting Assad's chemical weapons, but the United States didn't tell them. They said, we need this corridor, we want to fly along it. The Russians said yes, and then the United States then flew their bombers through there, and they bombed this chemical weapons factory within reach of the Russian air defences. But there are no Russian air defences anywhere in the Middle East anymore, not manned by Russians. So the Russians have had to evacuate from Syria, and they didn't have enough strength to support Assad's regime against rebels in open-top trucks. So they had to evacuate, and all their soldiers and all their equipment, they took it out of Syria. They evacuated the port in Syria. They hope to come back, and they're trying to negotiate with the Syrian government. But they were just pushed out by these rebels that took over from Assad's regime, and they no longer have a port or an air base anywhere in the Middle East. And China just has one small base in Djibouti, which is on the entrance to the Red Sea, and it's to protect shipping. And it's not good. China stopped its supply of weapons, which was just military supplies, nowhere it's an ally, to Iran in 2022. And then it's absolutely obvious. So now if I go down here, this other graphic I've got here, where is it? There. So the Israelis, they have complete air control, and many people don't understand what that means. That means that Iran can't fly its own fighter jets over its own capital city because Israel has control of the skies. And China, so what is Russia? For those of you who think Russia and China are military allies, well, Iran has been asking Russia to supply it with air defences because Israel showed how strong it was on October 26, 2024. In just one day of bombing, it destroyed all the Russian S-300 air defences that Iran had. And Iran said to Russia, send us on more modern air defences, S-400 at least. And Russia didn't send them. I'm not surprised, because Russia is rapidly running out of air defences in Ukraine, and also Russia knows that its air defences are very vulnerable to NATO weapons and allied weapons. And if suppose it was to supply Iran even with its S-500s, and then Israel does another bombing raid and destroys all of those in one day, then it would be very embarrassing for Russia. So anyway, Russia has not supplied any air defences to Iran. And then Iran said, well, send us at least your modern fighter jets, because Israel has F-16s and we have nothing even remotely capable for fighting against them. And Russia said, yes, we'll send you our Su-35s. They're roughly equivalent to the F-16s. And then it was in the news that these Su-35s supposedly had arrived in Iran just a few weeks ago, but apparently they hadn't. Because when Israel invaded, did not on the ground, but invaded the Iranian air and took over the air, there was not a single Su-35 to be found to stop them. They've only got their ancient F-16, ancient jets that are likely hiding away in caves, and they don't dare to fly for as long as Israel has control of the skies. And Iran is rapidly running out of launchers to launch its ballistic missiles, and it's running out of ballistic missiles, and it's got no allies and nobody coming in on its side. So how could it make any sense that the United States and China, that Russia and China are suddenly going to come in on Iran's defense because the United States has sent B-2 bombers to drop bombs into this enrichment facility. Makes utterly no sense whatsoever. And Russia is not in favor of Iran's nuclear program either. Russia doesn't support Iran's nuclear program. Russia doesn't want a nuclear-armed Iran. It complied with the JCPOA, the agreement to stop Iran's nukes for as long as the United States remained in it. Russia was in it too. So Russia doesn't want these. Russia doesn't want Iran to have nuclear bombs. Why would it go in and protect Iran from the B-2s and get egg on its face? So I should add that in here as well, that Russia doesn't want Iran to have nukes anyway. So that is most of this covered. And then just one other thing, I've got this as a separate thing. So this is just a rather fun kind of bit of comic hyperbole. But you know how much the United States presidents are very averse to even a single American dying. And Trump is especially so, because Trump has said that he's not going to approve any more foreign wars for Americans to go out and fight in foreign wars that have nothing to do with defending their country, and that they would die defending other countries. And Trump said he wouldn't do that. And so, of course, he couldn't stop it, what was happening in Afghanistan, but he tried to withdraw as fast as possibly as he could. He tried to withdraw from Syria, and he started no new operations that would have any risk to American lives. So with that background, now imagine that one soldier is killed by an Iranian ballistic missile in retaliation as a result of the B-2 bomb in an American base somewhere in the Middle East. Now imagine what on Fox News, Trump's favorite channel or whatever, all over the U.S. news, and all the relatives, his wife, his children, his parents, his grandparents, and others say comic hyperbole, some old person who's his second cousin 3 times removed, that like if this is the soldier, and you go up to this you've got the great-grandparent, grandparent, parent, children, great-grandchildren, person, and then person B, which is the person, that's the soldier, and some ancient person who, because of different generation times, is still alive. And that person might well pop up on the news and say, when I was young, I remember his great-grandparent or something, this soldier's parents, and we used to play together. I remember this soldier's great-grandparent, we used to play together or whatever. So that's the sort of thing that you might get on the news. Not literally, but that was a joke. But you know what I mean. So I think I've covered most of this. Now let's see, what else do I need to go into? So right, now this is understanding levels of confidence. So some people say to me, but human beings are so unpredictable. You never know what a human being is going to do. And that's true of some things. But in other ways, humans are very predictable. So I've got this example here, that you've got summer and winter, day and night. That's top of the level of predictability. If you are in a place not above the Arctic Circle, obviously, for day and night, because there's some periods when it's always night and sometimes when it's always day. And obviously not in the tropics, for the summer and winter, there are other patterns that are predictable. But this is, for instance, the United Kingdom, northern United States. And then you always have summer and winter, you always have night and day. And then this is an example of something that's hard to predict but unlikely, and that would be hail in spring or summer, unless you're in somewhere like, I think it's Colorado, where you have hail in the summer every year. But most places it's quite rare. And then if the famous example where it's impossible to predict is whether it's going to rain in Britain, whether you're going to have to get your umbrella, for those who wear them. Not that many British people go around with pollies, but they do quite a lot in London still. Do you have a polly? And in 4 weeks from now, you're not going to know if you're going to need it or not. So if we look at this similar certainty, we know that Iran hasn't got ICBMs. It hasn't got the technology. I'll come to that in a minute. It can't attack the United States. It can't fight a global war. And then, at the same level, as I've just explained, Russia and China are not helping Iran in any way, and they won't help if the United States strikes Iran. That's the summer, winter, day, night level of predictability. Now, look at like hailstorms, hard to predict, but it seems unlikely. So Trump is very risk averse, and he wants a peace deal. And I expect it to be like Putin, that if Iran, for some reason, 2 weeks from now, the deals, Iran is still not talking to Trump, he will probably say, you've got to talk to me within 2 weeks. He'll talk very tough. He won't mention that he's already reached the end of his previous 2-week deadline, and he'll just set another 2-week deadline in a very tough way. I think that's quite possible, because he is so very keen on a peace deal. He does not want a war. He does not want a regime. He knows very well that he can't topple the Iranian regime. He wouldn't achieve anything with that. So that's not his aim. But it's hard to predict, because Trump is inherently rather unpredictable, and there's some things that are impossible for him. He can't use a nuke in Ukraine. He can't use a nuke against Iran. I've got a separate blog post about that. The many reasons why he'd be prohibited from doing that. But some things, like whether he might approve this strike for some reason or other, that's like even though it's going to scupper his peace plans and mean that he can't really achieve peace very unlikely to get peace with Iran. I mean, he is a little bit, sometimes he seems a bit addled, I mean, he's got rather confused thinking. So I don't mean in any mentally deficient way, but just that he sees things very differently. And so he can be quite hard to predict, but I think it's unlikely that he would do it without unlikely to strike the Fordo facility and try to make it as precise as possible when he can use it to pressure Iran to talk. So as long as he knows he can use not striking the Fordo facility to pressurize Iran to the talks, I think he's unlikely to hit it. But we will see. And then, as unpredictable as rain in UK, and that's when Israel will stop its strikes, and what precisely it will target next, because we don't know what Israel's aim is. One thing we know, it can't be as intense as the Gaza strikes because of the huge distance. It's got to keep flying 1,000 kilometers, at least 1,500 or more, to get to central Iran every time it drops the bombs. So it can't be as intense as the Gaza strips because of the distance to get to fly there. So these levels of confidence, this analogy of summer, winter, day, night with the highest level, may help you to understand and to feel safer, because understanding that you can be confident about some things. And now, there's another thing that makes people rather scared. They tend to think that leaders like Trump and Ayatollah, for that matter, and Xi Jinping, because they have a very different ideology, very different ideas about things, very different, and they seem very cruel. Trump, but Putin especially, seems very cruel sometimes, and they think, therefore, this is clearly someone who's lost his ability to control his impulses. And this idea gets boosted in the mainstream media, but it's completely false, as I'll explain in a minute. So most people, they develop impulse control aged about 3.5 to 4. And this is an example. So if you go to a kindergarten, you may find some child equivalent of doing that, if they're under age 4. Just playing, standing on his head, throwing things at people and so on. Or her, for that matter, a boy or a girl, who just hasn't yet learned impulse control and doesn't quite know what to do, and just hasn't learned that there is that ability in a human brain to control your impulses. So that is something that most people learn age 4. And then you get people who seem as if they've lost their control. And I did teacher training at one point. Sadly, long story, I never actually passed my teacher training, but I did teacher training, and during teacher training I had to simulate being angry. I wasn't angry for a moment, but I'd say, "Stop that!" or something, like I had to shout as if I was angry. And if it was a class, it would get out of control. And stop that right now, or whatever, You know how teachers have to do it? They're not angry at all, but they have to shout, because it's the only way that you're going to get them to do what you're asking them to do if it's an unruly class in a country where sometimes students are unruly, like the United Kingdom. So that's simulated lack of impulse control, but adults don't generally have, and it's called also response inhibition, and so that's about impulse control and about teacher. So now then people say, but what about when Putin invaded Ukraine? Surely that was just an emotional impulse, and he just sort of thought, oh, I've had it with all these peace talks, let's just invade Ukraine, and not even without any thought. That is a myth. A lot of people believe that falsely. So in reality, Putin first decided to invade Ukraine in early spring 2021, and he may have decided it already in 2020. And then he did the 2021 exercises in order to practice getting his soldiers in place, and to see what the Allies would respond to that. And he'd had the previous experience of taking over Crimea in 2014 almost effortlessly, and he thought he had a perfect plan to take over all of Ukraine just as easily. And then he sent his spies, and they sent him very false information. They gave him rosy-tinted information back, saying that if he was to suddenly take over the Kiev government by surprise, that the Ukrainian generals would transfer the legions to him, and the Ukrainians would welcome his army with flowers. So he believed that. Kind of very flattering of him. And so when the invasion happened, he hadn't told his generals what he was going to do. All that was just a feint. So his aim was to send a big army to the north, to the west, to the south, get the Ukrainian government all preoccupied with that, sending their soldiers in all directions away from the capital. And then, with the soldiers gone from the capital, and the generals and the government worrying about what to do that, he'd then send in a very small group of soldiers that he'd got trained specially to then fly along the Dnieper River, very low, below the trees, near the trees, along the Dnieper River, to try and bypass the radar. They'd land in Hostomel airport, they'd take over the airport, and then they'd send in transport planes with tanks and armoured vehicles. They'd drive into Kiev very quickly, before Kiev could set up any resistance at all. They'd take over the government, and then they thought that the army would quickly transfer allegiance to them, and then they'd mop up resistance, and it would take about 2 weeks to take over all of Ukraine. And Putin was so confident in that he had no plan B. So when this failed, and I go into some detail about how it failed, it's an interesting story, and some stories of bravery by a few people who would never expect to suddenly meet the creme de la creme of the Russian military trying to land on Hostomel airport. They managed to stop them. They blew up their helicopters, and Putin had to start to call back on that plan. So, talking about this and various other things, the Institute for the Study of War, they say Putin is a very risk-averse individual. So now think about the level of impulse control that Putin had to do that. From probably as early as 2020, at least early 2021. He didn't tell any of his own generals what his plans were, all the way through to 2022 in the invasion. He had frequent meetings with the Western leaders and with Macron, and he claimed to be trying to find a way to path to peace. He was talking to Biden, he was talking to Macron, He was talking to all sorts of Western leaders, leaders from the United Kingdom, all trooping over to see him. And all that time, he had extraordinary impulse control because he knew all that time that he was going to invade Ukraine. And that was his plan all along. This is not someone who does things under impulse. He's got an extraordinarily high level of impulse control, such as you would expect from someone who trained as a KGB spy and is used to pretending to be someone he isn't for years on end. That is the level of impulse control that Putin has. And he is very, very risk averse. So he is not someone who acts on emotions. He does simulate emotions, like a teacher does sometimes, but he never acts on emotions. He's extraordinarily risk averse. And he's got probably the highest level of impulse control of all the world leaders at present. Extraordinarily high level of impulse control. So Russia is not going to help Iran. Now this is their utterly useless guarantee that they signed with Iran. They said, in the event that either contracting party is subject to aggression, the other contracting party shall not provide any military or other assistance to the aggressor. So, for as long as the United States is attacking Iran, then Russia promises not to supply the United States with weapons. It's absurd. They're never going to. They never were going to anyway. And then they offer to mediate, and they do diplomacy. They're never going to come in on the side of Iran. And Iran is not in Russia's nuclear umbrella, so I explained that just in a little bit more detail. So this is from the Atlantic, and their summary. They talk about how Kremlin's obvious reluctance to treat Crimea as fully Russian, because they don't do anything after the numerous, the sinking of the Moskva, the destruction of the Sevastopol headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet, and then since that article, which was long before that, destroying a large fraction, a third possibly, or some say less than that, but whatever large fraction of their strategic bombers, that is not what their nuclear umbrella is for, clearly. And then Putin put up this new dogma that was so vague that almost anything could count as a reason to use their nukes. And so that a worried Russian person asked this question of Putin's spokesman Peskov, and she asked, this is one of the largest, it was at the time, one of the largest Ukrainian attacks on Russia. And it took after he announced the new nuclear doctrine principles, will such cases be grounds for the use of nuclear weapons? And he said, frankly speaking, there's no need to appeal too much to this document. So no, he's just saying basically we ignore that document whenever it's anything to do with nukes, because so it was just for propaganda. It's not a real thing. And because the whole point of the nuclear deterrent is to deter. There's no point in using them against something that's already happening. The whole point is to say, don't do this, or we'll use nukes. That's the basic thing about nukes. You only use them against something that isn't happening. There's no point against using them against something that is threaten to use them, not to actually use them. You never actually use them. You just threaten to use them to stop something happening. So that's the whole point. So, as we see, it's far less risk than the raid on the chemical weapons factory. I think I explained on that. China stopping the equivalent to Ukraine. So why do politicians say this risks spiraling to a larger war? Because then again, look, there's nobody coming in on Iran's side. Russia won't, China won't. None of Israel's neighbours support Iran anymore. Lebanon don't. Hezbollah are no longer forced to be reckoned with. Syria won't. Jordan won't. Egypt won't. So Israel's got no neighbours. And the Hezbollah are no longer a factor. And all they've got are the Houthis in Yemen. They're greatly degraded and they're too far away to do anything. Now, other people also worry that Iran might do something like 9/11. So it's important to realise Iran is not fought against ISIS. They won't do anything like 9/11. All they do is assassinations of Iranian opposition figures abroad. They do that, and that's why they classified a terrorist organisation. Plus there's one other incident a couple of decades ago against the US Army, US Marines or something, I can't remember. But they do not terrorize civilians. I should say something like Iran does not terrorize civilians in that first title. And they are Muslim, and they are militant, but they are not jihad. They're not actually the word jihad is very much misunderstood and mistranslated. It actually means peace. And it is distorting the idea of jihad to use it to attack civilians in a very serious way. And lots of Muslims speak up against it and say ISIS is not speaking for them at all. And it's a bit like the connection between the Ku Klux Klan, who claim they're Christian, and true Christians. So ISIS is not representative of Muslims, and so Iran is militant, it does assassinate people, but it is it doesn't support, and it rather confusingly supports Hamas, which did attack civilians in Israel. That's a very uncomfortable association for the Iranians. So they support Hamas because it's opposed to the Jews, not because of what it did to the Jewish civilians. And so for political reasons, and it doesn't itself attack civilians. So I'm not saying this to support the Iranian regime. It's very harsh in many ways, especially in its treatment of women in Iran, and it's sponsored terrorist attacks against the State of Israel. But it's just to say, for anyone who's scared of something like 9/11, it is not something that Iran will do at all. They will never do something like that. They have limits. So it's important to understand where people are coming from, and different groups, like that day and night thing, the 100% thing. 100% certain Iran is not the sort of a country that would attack civilians. And if it's destroying, harming civilians in Israel, that's more like being careless, in the same way that Israel is careless of civilians in the Gaza Strip, because its weapons are very imprecise and they're hundreds of meters of ever. They're not involved in targeting civilians. There's no instances of them doing that, of them deliberately targeting civilians. So you don't need to worry about them doing a terrorist attack of the 9/11 type, because they just don't do that sort of thing. I've talked about Fordov. That is just about how this is the one they can do it, pretend to hit 60 kilometers, but they'd have to keep on hitting because of the fall through. Right, so now, so this is about Trump's plans. So he's certainly following the playbook of what the experts say he should do if he wants to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table. They say that threatening to destroy the nuclear facilities in Fordo is a worthwhile thing to do. Actually destroying them would just force it deep underground and make it very difficult. You can't control enrichment by military action. That's the basic point. But you can control it by dialogue and by weapons inspectors. That's the only way to control enrichment. And it's proven successful in numerous countries. So if Trump wants to control enrichment and stop Iran from getting the nukes, then it should pursue the non-proliferation treaty approach, which works and is proven to work. And it shouldn't use the military approach, which is proven never to work. It's never succeeded. So that is why Trump is likely just bluffing. Unless we hear he actually has attacked Fordov, then it's very likely, as long his advisors will be telling him this. He may have some people tell him the opposite, but hopefully he gets the right advice, and this is what he does. And so far, everything he's done is consistent with this. And Iran is getting weaker and weaker. it's firing far less ballistic missiles than it used to, and it's running short on launchers can use to launch, so it can fire a few of them at once. And then also shows why the Ukrainian war. So the reason that Iran is losing its ability to fight so very quickly is because Israel has complete air control over the whole of Iran, anywhere it wants to, including the capital city. Once a country has air control over another country, then it's very difficult for their military to function anymore. They can still do terrorist resistance. They can do resistance like Hamas does in Gaza Strip. They can't fight back effectively. And the NATO is so much superior to Russia in the air that if Ukraine had the NATO F-35 fighter jets, and had enough of them, then it could get full air control over Ukraine and bordering areas of Russia, and then it would be very, very difficult for Russia to keep fighting. So this helps you see why Russia is not going to attack NATO and why Putin keeps on bluffing to try and stop its allies from giving Ukraine more weapons, because it knows that it's way outmatched if Ukraine got what NATO has. So hopefully that will help some of you get scared of NATO, of Russia attacking NATO. And there's no chance of the conflicts joining up, because as we see, Iran has no interest in attacking Ukraine. It just supplied the Shahed drones. Russia has no interest in attacking Israel. China has no interest in either of those. And North Korea has no interest in any of them. And nobody else has any interest in North Korea or China or in Taiwan respectively. None of them have goals that are of interest to the other, except they're all, to some extent, aligned in being opposed to the West, but not in a way that they join together in a military alliance, just politically. There's no possibility of a world war, and they can't fight a world war anyway. And India and Pakistan can't either, because basically what happened is, I go through that in my bigger debunk, just a very short summary. Russia, as a land empire, it expanded to cover a large part of the northern Asia. China, as a land empire, it expanded to cover a large part of southwestern Asia. The Europeans, however, they developed sea power, and they developed colonies throughout the world. And so, for that historical reason, then the colonies mean they have bases throughout the world, which gives them the ability in a modern world to quickly fly planes there, to like the United States did to Guam. Russia and China can't do that to anywhere, because they don't have any foreign colonies they could fly bombers to. So it's only NATO countries, because they're European and because they originated in sea empires instead of land empires, they have the ability for force projection, which means they can rapidly send forces abroad and then they can supply them logistically to keep them supported. Only they can do that. So China and Russia, they can't fight globally. They can only fight locally to their own territories. Because in the modern world, because they didn't develop, and the United States, it had no colonies to speak of at the beginning of the 20th century, but it's got close connections with other European colonies, and so it set up bases in other European colonies that are friendly with the United States. And so in the end, the United States now has the largest number of bases of any country in the world. Got 750 foreign bases, mainly in former colonies of Europe. And then you've got the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Portugal, various countries in Europe that have a few foreign bases. France and United Kingdom still have lots of them scattered around the world. And the United States has the largest number of all, 750 of them. Those are the only countries that could fight a global war. So I talk about that a little bit. So, no, did I just cover that section twice? I seem to, I'm not sure if I got that twice. The risk of conflict. Have I got all that twice? Yes, I have. I seem to have said all that twice. So yes, I've got some duplications, so I'll get rid of that. So, and then we've got to say why there's no risk of a world war from Iran. So, just look at Iran itself. And the no Iranian proxy, well, I've talked about that. Just a graphic summary of what I already talked about. So that's Iran. It's 1,000 kilometers away from Israel, which is the only country it's really interested in attacking in the Middle East. All it can do is fire ballistic missiles over there, and the cruise missiles and drones, they're very easily shot down. Ballistic missiles, they fly over intervening countries into outer space. So even people in Iraq and Jordan, they're not really at risk from ballistic missiles. And then they're easily shot down by Israel. Then, if we go and look, this is about how wars in the Middle East always stay in the Middle East. It's for the reason I explained again, that the Middle East countries, they've never developed empires at all. There's no, lots of Muslim countries, but there were Muslim empires, called land empires. Sorry, I don't know enough about the history about that. I should look into that a little bit as to why but they certainly don't have force protection either. They don't have bases around the world. I don't think they went into sea voyages either, but I shouldn't say too much about that because I haven't looked into the history as to why Muslim countries don't have force protection in the same way, but certainly they don't. So the 42. So when Iraq was there were two Iraq wars, in 1991 and then the later one. I haven't got the date there, have I? And in the first war, 42 other countries from every continent of the world fought against Iraq, and the war didn't spread beyond the Middle East in any way whatsoever, because Iraq is just one country. So it's not going to happen. So I didn't explain up here. Israel can't reach Iran on the ground. Iraq won't let it through. Syria won't let it through on the ground. Jordan won't let it through. It just can't drive up to Iran. And Iran can't drive up to Israel. So all they can do is fly planes there, 1,000 kilometers, and that's why you won't get anything like Gaza in Iran. You just can't. You can't get that level of intensity of bombing because they've got to fly so far each time. And there's no possibility of they can't go by sea. It's far too far away. They have to go through the Suez Canal or something. Or I don't know. They can't get to Iran by sea feasibly. They can't get over land feasibly. Iran can't do the same either in either direction, either by sea or by land. So it's just by air. And if the United States join in, it's just for one mission or maybe two different places. It might be a series of missions to drop into Fordov, and there's another nuclear enrichment facility that the Nanets or something it's called, that the Israelis would want the United States to get involved in. The same thing, just dropping bombs one after another from a B-52 at 15 kilometers height into a single spot on the ground over and over and over again. That's the only thing Israel doesn't know how to do. And then, Israel would love to have tankers from either the United States or United Kingdom to help them, but I think that's a bit unlikely that they get involved in that way with their strikes of Iran. So that's not going to turn into a war like the Iraq War. The Iraq War, they were fighting on the land, on the sea, and in the air. Nothing like that could happen with Iran and Israel, and nobody else wants to join in. So it's not going to raise to anything like the Iraq War. Israel just fighting in the air and some occasional missions for the United States. That's the most can happen there. And then this is about how Iran can't shoot further than there. I just want to explain about ballistic missiles. So without the re-entry technology, anything by continental range will just burn up on re-entry. It would be possible to do something like an aeroshell, but it'd be very easy to shoot down. You need an ICBM that goes very quickly through the atmosphere, and so for it to be difficult to shoot down, streamlined, precise, directed. And Iran can't do that without a series of tests, and it's shown no interest in developing an ICBM, and you can't have nukes on an ICBM or on any ballistic missile in less than 2 years. And so now I just want to talk about how Iran doesn't want nukes. So Iran is politically very diverse, but it quite diverse in its parliament. But it's got the Ayatollah can override anything that they do. So really it's the opinion of the Ayatollah that matters here. And it's very clear that Iran, it's ratified the Non-Proliferation Treaty, it doesn't want to leave it. The reason that it's been secretive about uranium is for the very natural reason it doesn't want its underground uranium to be bombed. So it might have a secret stash somewhere. It's in the form of a heavy gas that turns solid when cold. It's 2 years before it could turn into a nuke. Countries that have, and I just want to say, if you've got all the relatives and friends who lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and here's one of our members who talked to his granddad. So try talking to your granddad about that, whether there could be a World War III, or elderly people who are 65, 70 or older, then they have lived through the Cold War. And they will likely have a very different perspective on younger people, because they've been through far worse than this. And someone who's in his 80s, like this was an 83-year-old granddad, he'd lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Try talking to people like that, and you will find they have a very different perspective on this, you should find. And then just want to say that Iran always votes for a nuclear weapon-free Middle East every year in the UN General Assembly. The only country that votes against that in the Middle East is Israel. The only country that votes against it in the entire world is Israel. And 3 abstain: Argentina, Cameroon and the United States. Everyone in the Middle East votes for a nuclear weapon-free Middle East every year in the UN General Assembly. So this idea, it is Israel which secretly developed nukes for its own use and does not declare them to the International Atomic Energy Authority, then it is the only country that wants to have nuclear weapons in the Middle East. So if Israel were to give up its nuclear weapons, then everyone else would give up immediately. And everyone else would immediately establish a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. So this is a kind of psychological thing that Israel does. It keeps giving this impression that it's the only country that wants a peaceful Middle East. And Iran has been saying every year that it wants a nuclear weapons-free Middle East. So it's all back to front. Now I'm not saying everyone in the Iranian parliament is like that, but certainly the Ayatollah is, who has the last word in everything. So again, I'm not saying this to in any way support the Iranian regime. It is to understand their point of view and not be scared of them, by understanding that they're very reluctant to develop nukes. It's very obvious. They've been just a few days away from enriching enough uranium to make a nuke for months now. And 6 months away from their first nuclear test for months now, many months, for sometime last year. So it's clear they don't want it. And then this is another thing. So India is a nuclear power, but every year it calls for a convention to prohibit all nukes. So India does not want to have nukes. It's got nukes to protect itself from Pakistan. If it can develop and protect itself in the world, I think India got its nukes first, then Pakistan. But India has got nukes because other countries have nukes. It wants urgently to eliminate all nukes tomorrow. And every year, and the majority, 121 countries joined India, 49 against, 12 abstain. That's every year is similar numbers that say they want to eliminate all nukes very quickly. And those are the countries that voted in 2024. All those countries voted to hold a convention on the prohibition of nukes in 2024. As you can see, it's mainly pretty much the entire southern hemisphere, apart from Australia and New Zealand, voted for that convention, and a few other countries. And then look at the nuclear-free zones. That includes Australia and New Zealand, and it includes those are all the stands apart from Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that's Mongolia. That's a South American nuclear-free zone. That's an African. That's an Asian one, and that's the Australia and New Zealand. And everyone agrees that Antarctica is nuclear weapon-free. So you can see, pretty much the entire southern hemisphere below the equator is a nuclear weapon-free zone. And so not many people know that. And then there's a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. This is now entered into force. The countries that sign this treaty are prohibited from developing nuclear weapons, many of them non-proliferation treaty anyway. And they want all the countries in the world to join that treaty. But other countries are not prohibited, only ones that join the treaty. So hopefully I did these polls in our group. And that's how I found out that. So hopefully I've dealt with the top things in those lists. I haven't covered absolutely everything. I think I've covered most of those things. And let's look at the ones for why said Russia would get involved. Oh, those are both why said Russia got involved. I've got a poll somewhere about. Yes, so I've got to change the. I did a poll also about things I need to do about Syria, about Iran, and the top voice about Iran. So I'll pop that in there as well. I've got a few things to do, I can see. I've got that duplicate thing, I've got this thing about I've got to get the right numbers for the polls and so on. But anyway, so I'll now upload this, and hopefully this helps some of you if you're scared. So look in the video description. This is my previous one, and earlier blog posts. Oh, and this is just a silly thing about, I did that. It took me quite a while to get the chatbots. I couldn't find, they do these things at the end of these videos about things that went wrong. So I thought I'd do one of those. So I looked for a tree of your second cousin 3 times removed. I couldn't find one, so I tried to get the chatbots to do one. And I eventually got Perplexity AI to do one for me. And I had to tell it. I had to read the code that it uses. It does them producing Python code. So I can look at the code and say, look, you got the code wrong there. It made numerous mistakes when I tried to do it. And I got it to fix it eventually. And this I couldn't do that with ChatGPT. This is what ChatGPT put. That this is me. This is my second cousin 3 times removed, which is my parent. And it's got a child it's got, it's just bonkers stuff. A child that has great-grandchildren, great-grandparents that have and it's their children. It just went completely nuts. And this is what Perplexity AI did. I mean, it doesn't even make the slightest bit of sense. It's got lots of grandparent 2, grandparent 2, grandparent 2, great-grandparent, grandparent 2, parent 2, grandparent 1, grandparent. It's got 3 grandparent 2s, and lots of parent 1s and parent 2s. It doesn't have a clue. So, okay, chatbots are nowhere near capable of drawing family trees quite yet, and I thought that might help some of you who worry that chatbots are going to take over the world or something. And I think they're always going to have limitations of some sort. They'll get better and better at things, at certain things, but they'll do daft things because there's nothing. They're just pattern generators. There's nothing there that knows what anything means. Anyway, right, okay, that's it. So let's see. I'll go to a section for that will be the preview. for the video. I think I would do a good preview. Sorry, don't mean to do that. Yep, that's okay. So go and look at the video description, and I'll put a link to this article, and I hope that helps you be less scared. Comment if you've got any questions. Email me. I've got contact details at the bottom there, and if you've got any questions about all this, anything you're still scared about Iran or Iraq, I can do another video if necessary, and hopefully this covers some of the main things that scare you.